All right, excellent. Now I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump right in. Okay, um, second recording now for training purposes for the Life Cycle Model Review meeting. This is an actual live client, and I have tax returns and I've got account statements, so we should have quite a bit of fun today. Hopefully you guys are all doing well, and so we're going to jump right in. I got a couple in their mid to late 60s, and they're getting ready to retire pretty soon. I actually believe that the wife is a stay-at-home, and in fact, I might just put in here homemaker because she has no real income or pensions to her name. And the husband makes about $150,000 a year. He's a executive level manager at a construction company. And then they have one daughter who is married and has one child. So they are enjoying one grandchild, and I think they're kind of entering the golden years of life, which is great. So they are super enamored with the daughter and grandchild and their son-in-law, and they are starting to put money away into a 529. And I had already potentially suggested that that might not be the best place for them to put that money because their daughter and son-in-law don't make a ton of money, and they may be able to qualify for financial aid for college. So we did suggest that maybe that wasn't the best place to put money. But of course, the general rule of thumb that we use is if you put money into retirement accounts, it kind of takes money off the table for counting against your kids for financial aid and scholarships, loans and grants and things like that. But most of the time, if you put money into a retirement account, you can still use it for college, but you can't use college money for retirement. So we're going to want to focus more on tax sheltered accounts and some other things that aren't going to harm their kids and grandkids from getting whatever they're entitled to for college planning purposes. So that's the first sort of piece of advice, and they got that right away, so they're not going to be putting any more money into the 529 plan. Long-term care is a concern of theirs, so because we're in the life cycle model review meeting, we've already started the underwriting process for insurance purposes. We probably didn't tell them a lot about what the solution was or what we were thinking, but we certainly said, hey, I need to know how healthy you guys are relative to each other. So let's go ahead and have an insurance health exam done for you and your wife, and we'll get that information back and look at some options, and we'll talk about that later on for both life insurance and long-term care. And now we're going to go back down to the heart of the model, and the stuff that kind of jumps out at us right away is the income that he's making now, $150, and he's deferring, he's maxing out, or very close at least, to max out his 401k because that's what they're all taught to do. And when I project his retirement income, with his Social Security and his wife's Social Security plus his required distribution, investment income, he's going to be making at least how much he's making right now. But he's actually saving quite a bit now. So he's saving $24,000 a year in retirement. He won't be saving into his 401k. And he's also saving about $1,000 a month or $12,000 a year into Vanguard, into a joint brokerage account. So I think it's pretty eye-opening, and it kind of jumps right out at you, hey, you're not going to be making less money in retirement than you're making now. And so the tax situation is, hey, we don't necessarily want to keep deferring taxes until later on. So we will show him if you reduce how much you're putting into here. Again, this guy says he might work till 72, so that's 5 years. All right. So instead of putting in $24,500, let's just put in $7,500. And instead of growing to $1.8 million, hit the tab button. You'll still grow to $1.7 million. So almost all the money that you have in there is going to be there almost no matter what. To put extra money into a government-controlled account that's going to be subject to an RMD, I don't think that's where you're going to want to be. Because if the government wants to raise taxes on us later on, or they're also even talking about potentially doing an excise accumulation tax inside of retirement accounts. There's all kinds of reasons why he may not want to put this extra money in here. So this is a very easy conversation for us to have. And then we're really going to kind of stick it to this whole traditional planning idea and say, look, even the 1.7, that's disturbing to me. And the reason why it's disturbing to me is because you're in a situation where you're probably not going to spend all this money. I don't think you're going to need it, and you're not going to be spending more money in retirement than you are right now, even though you'll have as much money. So what's going to happen to your 401k is you may end up leaving that $1.7 million or $1.8 million behind to your daughter and her grandchild. Are you familiar with what happens with a 401k in this type of situation where you would leave the principal and your wife can inherit the 401k, but in your particular 401k, a 401k doesn't roll over to your daughter or to your grandchild. So if you guys don't spend this money, they're going to have to pay taxes on it. And that taxable distribution to them is going to potentially obliterate a big portion of this 401k and put them in the highest tax bracket that they've ever been in. In fact, they're probably going to pay a lot higher tax. Let's take a look at your tax situation right now. If you go to married filing jointly, yeah, you're in this 22% tax bracket. There's a decent chance, and that's even if taxes don't go up, that you're going to be putting money in at 22 and your kids are going to be taking money out at 35. And if tax bracket goes up, this could be even higher. And I know it doesn't sound like a huge difference, but it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. 35% is almost 50% more than 24. And I just want him to stew on that for a little bit, right? Because that was never your intention. You didn't save and defer all this time to get penalized or for your daughter or grandchild to get penalized because you never pay taxes on any of this money. So tax brackets are really, really low right now. We may want to start redirecting this money somewhere where you may not have to pay taxes on it again. I know you know a lot about Roths because you have a couple Roths in play. Maybe you thought that you made too much money to do a Roth, but you certainly don't make too much money to convert to Roth. But I think what we should probably do is spend some time talking about how this 401k distribution strategy is an absolute nightmare for people that don't have proper planning. Because you're going to get crushed on taxes, your kids are going to get crushed on taxes, you've lost total control over everything. The government now dictates what's going to end up happening, and they can change the rules on us whenever they want. So these are all types of things where we're talking about strategy and philosophy. We're not actually talking about the actual investment yet. We're just talking about taxes and control. So let me go ahead and put this back here for a second. And I want him to go back, and I want him to reduce what he's putting into his 401k. And I want him to come back and show me his pay stub so I know how much extra money he's going to be taking home for the next 5 years that I'm going to be able to redirect somewhere else. All right? Now, when I go down here, I'm going to see a Vanguard account and a little ETF account that he has with Ameritrade that he's adding money to. Right? This guy's a great saver. His real estate's paid off. He's got a house that's got no mortgage on it. Right? So let me go ahead and pull up his account statement. And I'm assuming you guys can all see the screen because nobody's text messaging me and I'm doing everything right, which is great. So let's go ahead and pull up his tax return and his account statement, which I have hopefully saved on my desktop or somewhere on my internet. Okay. So here is his tax return. And here is his, I've got his account statements. What did I do with his tax return? Maybe I pulled it up here. I'll have to find it. Okay. So I think I did. I know what it is. It's right here. All right. So this is the actual tax return of the client that we're looking at right now. All right. So you'll see here that his wages are $122 because he's making $150, but he's deferring $24,500. We can tell that he's got some dividends and mutual funds and stuff because it tells us right here on line 3A that he's got some spin-off income from what's likely indexes or mutual funds of some sort of stocks. We can also tell, if you didn't know already, we could tell that the clients are over 65 because they're taking the standard deduction, and it's $26,600 each, so it's maxing out for people over a certain age. The interesting part about this tax return also is that he's overpaying big time. So he's getting about a $12,000 refund. And the reason for that $12,000 refund is probably because he is deferring so much money, and he could change his withholdings and just make an extra $1,000 a month if he wanted to. All right, but this tax return is pretty simple. There's not too much going on here. Standard deduction and a little bit of interest for bank accounts and funds. So that's the tax return, and so this tells me exactly what taxable bracket this guy's in right now at $106,000 of taxable income. We just showed you this a second ago. I'll show it to you again. So 106 is someone obviously smack dab in the middle of the 22% tax bracket, making between 77 and 165. Right? He's not ever probably going to go below 77. I can't imagine how that would ever be possible. He might go above 165 if he doesn't get his act together, but I do know that taxes are going to be going back up in the future, so we probably want to redirect some of that money somewhere else. All right? And then the second part of this that I have is not just his tax return, but then I've got his retirement account statement. So this is his 401k, and we've already told him to move it out because we're going to roll some of this money out of his 401k. We were talking to him about really not the investments themselves, but the lack of control inside that 401k, maybe some of the fees, but certainly the distribution options when he retires are going to be way better in an IRA. And then, of course, he can invest anywhere he wants. So, we in the training we do that Ben Franklin close, IRA versus 401k, and this was a pretty compelling thing for him. So he's already ready to go. But I did want to show you, which is not an uncommon thing. People choose these Fidelity Freedom Indexes all the time, or I guess you could call them life cycle funds or target date funds. And I just wanted to show you guys, in this particular case, the Fidelity 2030 account. We can look up the Fidelity 2030 account for the fees. So if you're not securities licensed, then you can definitely look up fees on accounts, but you might not want to talk too much about performance, or you don't want to talk too much about alternatives relative to that. We can certainly show them equity index annuities and life insurance, but let's just focus on fees right now for a second. So I've got my personal fund, and I've got my Fidelity Freedom, and I've got my tax sheltered account here. And I'm just going to go ahead and calculate costs. And I'm going to ask him, hey, do you have any idea how much Fidelity is charging you inside that account to manage this account? And this, by the way, is not inclusive of the 401k fees. So believe it or not, this guy was a high-level manager of the company. He is aware of a 401k fee, which he told me it was about 30 basis points inside the 401k on top of each individual fund. So he's paying about 1% or a little bit over 1% for this particular Fidelity account. And that's not an uncommon thing. So we might want to ask them, well, gee, if you're paying 1%, and here's where I'll go now into the calculators, if you're paying 1% to manage your 401k, and let's say you have, let me do the exact numbers for this guy. If you're paying 1%, you got 1.2, and you're adding $31,000 a year, right? How much you're actually paying in fee? What's the actual cost of that? So 1.2 million, and you're putting in $31,000 a year, and you're doing this for 5 years. May not seem like a huge deal, right? But let's just take a look. 1% fee. So over that 5-year period of time, he's going to pay about $75,000 in fees. So my question to you is, what are you getting as added value for that $75,000 fee? Do you think there might be a way that we can get something very similar to what you have there without having to pay the fee? And if we could do that and get you out of the sort of lack of control and the lack of options and saving the fees, I think we can make a pretty compelling argument to not keep that money in that 401k. So we want to do an IRA rollover, obviously. All right, and we want it to be based upon the fee and the lack of control. Now, if you do securities and you want to pull up a Morningstar report or some kind of comparison, I like to use Yahoo Finance. So this is Yahoo Finance Freedom 2030 Fund. And here's the funny thing about it is that you might think that this Freedom 2030 Fund is very low risk because it's showing a target date fund and supposed to be pretty conservative. But look at this 5-year volatility chart here. This doesn't really look like a very smooth line to me, even though the market's done really great over the last 5 years. It looks pretty volatile, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the comparison, as we always do, to something without a fee. We have the S&P 500. When I say without a fee, if you guys have done this before, you guys can go back onto the personal fund or whatever site you want and go back and pull up the Fidelity S&P 500 Index Fund as a comparison. Right? And so S&P 500 right here. So when we say no fee, there's always some type of marginal fee. You don't want to get into an argument with somebody. Of course, we do have things that are completely no fee, but if you want to just use an S&P 500 index, it's 0.02. So 0.02 versus 1% or whatever, because it's in the 401k plus the fee, that's a no-brainer for me, right? I can save you the fee. So, but there's a second piece of that, which is not only can we save you the fee, but let's go and do the comparison. I find that these target date funds, they just try to mirror the S&P. Even though they're supposed to be doing something a little bit more conservative or different. Let me make it brighter than purple, actually, sorry. Let me make it bright red. So when I do this and I pull up the S&P, what you're going to see is that these things kind of line up really, really closely. And I always tell people the longer you hold on to something that's trying to compare itself to the S&P, the bigger or the larger the separation becomes over time. So over a 5-year period, the S&P has blown doors on this account, but of course this account is a little bit more conservative. It's supposed to be probably doing a little bit, of a more tempered growth pattern. But in any case, the S&P is the benchmark, so we compare everything to the benchmark without the fee, right? And then, so we've probably made a pretty good argument out of this already. The second argument I'm going to make, or suggestion I'm going to make, is we can plot his other two things on there. So when I go back to the model, he's got a bunch of Vanguard mutual funds and ETFs, right? So we have these IRAs, but we also have these non-quals, right? So ETFs and Vanguard down here. Now the ETFs and Vanguard, if I go to my calculators, let's say there's $450,000, right? That's generating some current taxation. So if that grew at 5% or 5 years, this 450 would grow to 574. Here's some fees coming out of that account, similar to the other account, right? But now we have taxes to contend with, right? So in the state where I am, with federal plus state, let's talk about a 28% tax rate. So we already talked about saving on fees, but now we're also potentially looking at how much tax this guy is going to be paying. So over the next 5 years, if you continue to do this, you're going to end up losing over 10% of all your money. Think about that for a second. You're going to be losing over 10% of all your money to taxes and fees. So over $60,000. Oh, by the way, I forgot. He's adding $12,000 a year. So he's going to lose potentially $65,000 to taxes and fees. So my question to you is, do you believe, from a fee point of view and from a tax point of view, do you believe this is the most efficient thing we could be doing? And I just want the client to think about that. And my question to him is always, or her, or to the couple, is, do you think there might be a better way? And so the better way is, well, this money down here, I'll turn back to the model for a second, could be doing the exact opposite for you. Rather than causing you taxation, how would you feel if this actually started creating some tax benefits for you? Are you open to that? And of course, I'm going to introduce them to the idea of a charitable trust. And so I'll go right online, and like I always do, I'll go right into the charitable trust calculator and say, look, you got $450,000 in here. Let's just put some money into a charitable trust now, leave some money for later, and see what kind of benefit we might be able to get for that. And my internet's really slow because I've got all these different things kind of going at one time. So let's just go ahead and see. Okay, it happened for me. So again, I'm going to do a quick calculation, and I'm going to, let me just close this for a second. This is loading funny because I think I've got too many windows open. Okay, so let's just go ahead and try gift amount. So he's got 450. Let's just go ahead and do 250,000. And again, I'm just introducing him to the idea. Let's do it today. Payment rate 5%. And this age is 60. Let's say 67. I do not like the way this is lining up. Okay, so anyway, let's see if I can get some luck here and be able to input an age. 66, 67. All right, let's hit calculate. Yeah, of course, because these things aren't lining up correctly for me right now. So let me just close it and open up one more time. It doesn't look like it's going to allow us to do it. But in any case, I can do the calculation manually. So essentially what's going to end up happening is, I think this is because I have too many windows open, or we crash. Once in a while we crash their sites because so many of our guys are using it. But in any case, what we would show this particular client is, hey, let's say 250 of this in there would give you about $160,000 of tax benefits, and it would give you $12,500 a year of income. And so we could take that income, reinvest it somewhere else, but right now it's causing taxation. We would create a situation where it did the exact opposite. Rather than causing taxation, it would actually create some tax benefits. So he's got a couple other accounts inside of this Vanguard account, which I do have. And I'll try and do that calculation one more time at the end here. But when I looked at his stuff, he's got the total stock market index, which is the S&P 500. He's got his life strategy growth, and he's got more of his wonderful 2030 fund. And I just kind of find it hilarious that people have these different things, and they think they're all doing something different when everything's really pretty much the same. And so this conversation, I'm going to plug these in, VASGX. So let's go ahead and compare and add in his other holding, which is VASGX, VASGX. And I don't know if he's doing this himself. This Life Strategy Growth Fund, I'll make this one green. Oh, shocker. It's doing something almost exactly the same, right? It's just underperforming, charging you a fee to do a little bit worse, but it's still kind of mimicking every kind of up and down, up and down, up and down. Is mirroring it. And then the last account that he had was more the Target 30. This is the investor brand, so VTHRX. VTHRX, it should line up exactly right. VTHRX 2030. Make this one purple. Okay, there it is. So you'll see, by the way, this investor, the purple line, is the 2030 fund that's not in the 401k. So the outside 2030 fund is doing better than the inside 2030 fund, probably because of fees, right? But in general terms, these things are all doing similarly. They're all kind of underperforming. So let me just make sure I understand what you're doing here. You're paying a fee to have Vanguard manage these accounts for you so that you can do a little bit worse. And again, this is just a conversation that you're having. We're really getting him to start thinking hard about what he's doing. But honestly, this is going back to our regular philosophy of indexes, indexes, indexes. Not only should he be in indexes, but do you think maybe he should be doing some indexes that aren't all doing the same exact thing? Yeah, I would say probably. He just doesn't know that those are available. So we're going to introduce him to some of those examples and introduce him to some of those indexes. I might pull up. I did the CRUT right now. I might pull up, one of the indexes like I think I might have it. So this one on my desktop right here. Again, I don't like doing this for training purposes because I do know that things are going to be changing over time and over the years. We don't always use the same products. But here is a U.S. domestic index without any fee at all. I like that you can pull it right up on Bloomberg. I don't even have to get into the discussion with the client right now about what a one-year point-to-point is or any of that kind of stuff. But the reality is we can make a pretty awesome return. This one's gone 15% this year, so they would have earned that 15%. This is a U.S. domestic index, and it's just something that this particular client has probably never seen before, has never been introduced to before. And of course, we may talk about the equity index calculation with the random return calculator. So you guys all know the random return calculator, right? So if you're not doing a withdrawal, I'm not going to go into this in too great a detail today because we've all seen it before, but this equity index discussion is one that we want to get into in this meeting, which is, hey, maybe we would be more focused on saving you money on fee, taking a little bit less risk, and getting volatility out of our lives, right? And we can control the sequence of return by utilizing an equity index strategy that would include a fixed index inside of an annuity without a fee. And we may be able to perform much better by turning these negatives into zeros. So we can talk about real rate of return versus average rate of return, which you guys know we can do. But if I start taking the income out of this thing, as this guy's getting close to retirement, wants to take income, I'll show him the income and how we're able to maintain principal using this equity indexed annuity strategy versus a direct, Vanguard investment. And I can show him all the different scenarios. If I click this random button, and you guys, like I said, I've done this before, every time I click the random button, I'm going to get a different answer. And there is no scenario where there's an awful one right there, right? There's no scenario over here in a traditional index ETF or investment where you're going to be able to maintain principal based upon this volatility measure, historical speaking. And there really isn't a scenario on the fixed index annuity scenario where you would dip in really to any significant portion of principal. So to be able to save somebody in fee, but to be able to have a little bit more control over the sequence of return is pretty compelling. And like I said, this random variability, this guy doesn't need it, shouldn't have to deal with it. We can make his life much, much simpler. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about with this guy. We're blowing up his tax plan. We're blowing up his fees. We're blowing up the estate plan because, of course, the 401k is a horrible estate plan. It might be the worst estate plan on the planet. Introducing him to the charitable trust idea today to get him to sign the life insurance applications because we're in the second meeting. And I'm going to go online one last time and see if I can get my charitable trust calculator, the online one, to line up. And let me just close some of these other boxes now. Since we've recorded this, I don't have to keep all this stuff up here. Close this, close personal fund, close my stuff that I was doing, and just do charitable major trusts. Close the initial charitable trust calculator. Okay, last chance. Here we go. Open calculator. Keep your fingers crossed. Nope. It is not lining up. What on earth is it not lining up for? Gift date. The date. I understand what the gift date is. Let's just say now. Term. Based upon 5%. First beneficiary age. I don't think this is going to work. It's just like, oh, hey, it worked. All right, there you go. So I was sort of close. $250,000 at 67 will give you a $12,500 a year income stream and a $119,000 tax deduction. Would you like to flip your portfolio so that rather than it costing you taxes, it can actually create some deductions for you? And these deductions can be used to, ooh, that was a beeping in my ear. Hopefully you guys are still being recorded. This would allow you to Roth convert. It would allow you to take money out of your retirement accounts and not have to pay taxes. That's a pretty powerful statement. Would you like to take some money out of retirement accounts and not have to pay taxes, or at least offset the tax? So these are all these concepts that this guy is really, really chomping at the bit now to understand and learn about, and we're going to make a huge difference in this guy's life. So we're done the second meeting. We've introduced him to the trust. We've given him some information about rollovers. We're probably going to start the rollover process, but we're going to give him some brochures today. We're not going to say sign everything and transfer everything because that'll freak him out. This is his life savings, guys, right? But we're going to give him some brochures, have him read it, research the CRUT, think about these tax strategies. He'll come back in with questions. And then the third meeting, that's when we do our planning and our transfers and all other kind of good stuff. So I know at the end of the day, we're going to make a huge difference in the guy's life. I mean, it's going to be life-altering. It's not this investment, versus that investment. It's, hey, let's take a look at an overall strategy. We're going to add insurance protection for sure. We're going to save him a bunch of money on taxes. We're going to create an amazing estate plan for him. And he could never have done this on his own. His current advisor or wherever he's getting advice obviously hasn't spent any time dealing with strategy at all. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and see if you guys have any quick questions. So I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to